In the stillness of a quiet Texas neighborhood, where life typically unfolds without incident, something horrific took place one fateful evening. A mother, returning home after a long day, stepped into her house unaware that the foundation of her entire world was about to crumble. She found her husband, a respected local police officer, in a compromising situation with their 13-year-old daughter, an act that would forever alter the course of their lives. What happened next was as swift as it was devastating. In a moment of raw, shocking rage, the unthinkable unfolded. A mother, someone who was supposed to protect, became the very force that shattered her family's future. She picked up a weapon and pulled the trigger. In a matter of seconds, everything they knew was gone. What could drive a mother to such an extreme act? What kind of secret had been hidden in the shadows of their seemingly perfect family? A life, once built on trust, suddenly turned into a twisted and deadly reality. And as the sound of gunfire echoed in the stillness of the night, the question remained, was this a crime born from a moment of uncontrollable rage, or was it the terrifying result of a much darker truth, hidden behind closed doors? The answers are far from simple, and the mystery surrounding that night continues to captivate the minds of all who hear it. This is a story of a family broken beyond repair. A crime so shocking that it has left a town, and perhaps even a nation, questioning what really happened behind the walls of that home. Was it just a moment of madness? Or was something far more chilling at play here? If you're as intrigued by this case as we are, and want to hear more stories that delve into the darkest corners of the human experience, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll bring you more true crime stories that will keep you questioning every step of the way. A family torn apart. A crime that no one could have expected. And a question that lingers. What happened on that night, and what led to a mother's deadly decision? Was it an unthinkable act of pure rage? Or was it the culmination of something far more disturbing, simmering under the surface for far too long? This is not just the story of a crime, it is the story of a shattered trust, of a broken family, and of a mother who was pushed to her breaking point. The chilling truth is out there, and it's about to unfold in a way you won't soon forget. Join us as we dig into the details of this tragic and perplexing case. The answers may not be what you expect, but the journey will leave you wondering, how much do we really know about the lives of those closest to us? How much can we truly trust what we see and hear, when the truth hides behind layers of secrets and lies? Stay with us, as we piece together the chilling events that led to this unforgettable tragedy, and explore the mysteries that remain unsolved, long after the last shot was fired. It was a night that seemed like any other, but for one family in a quiet Texas neighborhood, it would mark the beginning of a tragedy that would forever haunt their lives. The evening unfolded as many do. Families wrapped up their days, children were called in from playing outside, and the steady hum of suburban life seemed uninterrupted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the neatly trimmed lawns, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. The sounds of a typical evening were in the air, the faint echo of a dog barking, the distant hum of a lawnmower still running, and the chatter of neighbors coming together after a long day. Inside one particular home, everything seemed peaceful. The dinner table had been cleared, the day's events shared among loved ones. But, unbeknownst to everyone, this calm was about to be shattered in a way no one could have ever predicted. A mother, Sarah Smith, came home after a long day at work, exhausted and ready to relax. She opened the door to her home, expecting to greet her children, to settle in, to enjoy the comfort of her family. But instead, she was met with an unimaginable sight. In that moment, the foundation of everything she thought she knew about her life and her family was violently ripped apart. Her husband, Mark Smith, a local police officer, a man she had trusted, a man who had sworn to uphold the law, was engaged in an act that no father should ever commit. There, in the privacy of their home, the one place Sarah had always felt safe, she caught her husband in a compromising situation with their 13-year-old daughter. The shock of the moment was overwhelming, and the weight of that discovery hit Sarah like a freight train. Her mind raced, struggling to process what her eyes had just witnessed. The man she had shared her life with, the father of her children, was not the person she had believed him to be. In an instant, everything changed. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing in as a rush of emotions flooded her mind. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, and a sense of overwhelming fear. How could this have happened? How could she have been blind to the signs? How could a man she trusted with everything betray her in the most unspeakable way? What followed in the next moments were actions that no one could have foreseen. A weapon, once used for protection, was now turned on the very people who were supposed to be protected. Sarah grabbed a gun. The mother, who had spent years nurturing and loving her children, turned the weapon on her husband and daughter. In a matter of seconds, everything was over. The shots rang out in the stillness of the house, breaking the silence that had once held it together. Neighbors, hearing the echoes of the gunshots, quickly dialed 911, their hearts racing with confusion. By the time the authorities arrived, it was too late. Mark Smith, the once respected officer, was dead. And the daughter, though alive, would never be the same. The scene was one of devastation. What had driven this mother to take such a drastic step? Was it a momentary lapse in judgment? A blind rage that overtook her sense of reason? Or was there something much darker at work beneath the surface, something that had been festering for longer than anyone could have imagined? The police were left to piece together what had happened. And as they looked over the crime scene, they realized the truth was much more complicated than it seemed. There was no simple explanation, no easy answer to this tragedy. The events that unfolded that night were the culmination of years of secrets, lies, and emotions that had built up to an unbearable breaking point. What caused Sarah, a mother who had once been filled with love for her family, to turn on the people she cared about most? What pushed her to make such an irreversible choice? Was it rage, raw and uncontrollable? Or was it something deeper, something hidden in the corners of their lives that no one had ever seen coming? The questions remain unanswered, hanging in the air like a thick fog. What was the truth behind that night? How much did Sarah know? How much did she choose to ignore? The investigation into the crime would reveal only a fraction of the picture, but the emotional toll would remain, leaving a family and a community to question everything they thought they knew about the people they loved. As the case continued to unfold, the chilling mystery lingered. How could something so horrific happen in the heart of a family, in the place where they should have felt safest? And, perhaps more hauntingly, could anyone have seen this coming? Could anyone have noticed the warning signs before it was too late? This was not a simple crime. This was a moment of devastation, a moment that forever changed the lives of everyone involved. And as the investigation deepens, we are left with more questions than answers, more darkness than clarity. What caused a mother to make such a fateful decision? What was hidden in the shadows of their family life that we may never fully understand? The Smith family was, on the surface, a picture-perfect American family. They lived in Oak Ridge, Texas, a small, quiet town where everyone knew everyone else, and appearances mattered. Mark Smith, the father, was the type of man you'd want to trust with your life. He was a local police officer, respected, well-liked, and considered a pillar of the community. His colleagues spoke highly of him, and neighbors viewed him as someone they could always count on. He had earned his position through years of hard work and dedication, both to his job and to his family. Sarah, his wife, was equally respected, known for her kindness and her deep commitment to their children. She was the definition of a devoted mother, always putting her children first. To the outside world, they were a couple to envy, a hard-working officer and a loving stay-at-home mother, raising their two children in a peaceful, suburban home. They seemed to have everything anyone could wish for: stability, trust, and love. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family, cracks were beginning to form. Every family has its secrets, and in the case of the Smiths, those secrets were far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Their seemingly idyllic home, full of laughter and shared moments, was hiding a growing tension that no one could see. The perfect image was just that, an image, and one that was about to come crashing down in the most horrifying way. It all started on one fateful evening. Sarah had come home unexpectedly after a long shift, ready to see her children and unwind. But what she walked into that night was beyond anything she could have ever prepared for. Inside her home, she discovered her husband and daughter in a private space, one where, as a mother, She could never have imagined what she would find. The moment she realized what was happening, her heart sank. Her husband, the man she trusted with everything, was engaged in an act that no mother should ever have to witness, with the one person she loved most, their own child. In the blink of an eye, Sarah's world was upended. There was no manual for how to process such a revelation. How do you even begin to understand what you're seeing? How do you comprehend that the man you've spent your life with, the father of your children, could betray you in such a horrifying way? The trauma of that discovery must have been unimaginable. In that moment, everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, and the man she loved, was shattered. What followed was a blur. In the heat of the moment, consumed by rage, confusion, and gut-wrenching betrayal, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Her hands, trembling with disbelief and fury, reached for a firearm. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It was a split-second choice, made in a frenzy of emotions too powerful for her to control. She confronted her husband and daughter, and in a moment of sheer desperation and panic, the unthinkable happened. The sound of gunshots echoed through the house, and everything fell silent. The details of that moment are still chilling, even to those who have investigated this case. There was no hesitation. There was no second-guessing. Sarah fired the weapon multiple times, ensuring that neither Mark nor her daughter would survive. The shots rang out, cutting through the tension and despair that had taken over the house. And just like that, 2 lives were extinguished. Mark Smith, the well-respected officer, was dead. His daughter, the child he had promised to protect, was left wounded, her life forever changed by the violence that unfolded in those few seconds. But the most haunting question remains: why? Why would a mother, someone who had always been a loving, attentive figure in her children's lives, do something so extreme? Was this an act of blind rage, a woman pushed beyond her limits, or was there something more at play? Could Sarah have seen this as a desperate act of protection, or was there something deeper buried beneath the surface of her actions? And how could a family that once seemed so perfect fall apart so completely, so violently? Mark Smith, the victim, had been known for his steady demeanor and his dedication to his community. He had been a trusted officer, a man who had served Oak Ridge for years. But behind that image of the perfect officer, the perfect husband, was he hiding something? Was he living a double life, a life that, if revealed, would shatter everything he had built? What had led him to betray the very people who trusted him the most? Was there more to the story than what Sarah had discovered, something even darker than what he had been caught doing? Then there's the daughter, an innocent victim in this tragedy, or was she? What role did she play in this devastating scene? Was she truly an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of a mother's rage, or was there something more complicated at play? Did she have any awareness of what was happening? How did she feel about her father and mother? The truth about her involvement is still unclear, and it leaves us with even more questions. What was going through her mind when the shots rang out? Did she understand the gravity of what had just unfolded? As the investigation continued, things began to unravel in ways that no one could have expected. Sarah's actions, while shocking, were not the only mystery. There was something unsettling about the entire situation. Something about the way Sarah reacted, about the decisions she made in the heat of the moment, that left investigators questioning everything. It wasn't just a simple crime of passion, it was something deeper, more complex, and more chilling than anyone could have anticipated. And here's where things take a truly twisted turn. Sarah didn't just pull the trigger once. She fired multiple times, ensuring that neither Mark nor her daughter would survive. The act was not one of mercy, not one of a mother trying to end her own suffering or the suffering of her child. No, this was something different. Sarah made sure that both of them would be gone. The sound of the gunshots, the fear and the chaos, the moment when she chose to act, there was no going back. What was going through her mind in those critical seconds? Could she have been thinking rationally, or was she simply consumed by emotion? Was this a moment of pure rage, or did something more calculated take over in her decision-making? Could there have been any warning signs, something anyone could have picked up on, that might have prevented this tragedy? Was it a sudden eruption of violence, or had the seeds of this disaster been planted long ago, hidden beneath the surface of their family life? As we dig deeper into this case, we realize that the truth is anything but clear. What led Sarah to pull the trigger that night? What drove a mother to commit an act so horrific, so final? And, perhaps most haunting of all, could this tragedy have been avoided, or was it inevitable all along? The camera zooms in, the dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows over a quiet neighborhood, the kind that you might associate with suburban tranquility, a place where the clink of morning coffee cups and the hum of lawnmowers fill the air. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave to each other from their front porches, where children play games in the yard, and everything seems perfectly ordinary. At least on the surface. But what if I told you that beneath that seemingly idyllic setting, a story unfolded that would shake this community to its core? What if I told you that behind the closed doors of a seemingly ordinary family, something far more complex, and ultimately destructive, was taking shape, something that no one could have predicted? Sarah had always been the picture of normalcy. She had a job, a home, a circle of friends, and a family who cared for her. She was well liked at work, seen as dedicated, responsible, someone you could always count on. But as we begin to piece together the fragments of her life, we realize that normal wasn't all it seemed. It wasn't just that one moment, the one that changed everything. It wasn't just a series of events that led her down a path no one saw coming. It was the hidden cracks, the moments that went unnoticed by those around her, the small, subtle signs that something wasn't quite right, even though no one had the courage to see it. And then, one night, everything came crashing down. What had been buried beneath the surface for so long finally broke free. A decision was made, one that would turn Sarah's life, and the lives of everyone who knew her, upside down. In the days that followed, the town was left reeling, desperately trying to understand the motive behind the unspeakable act. No one could wrap their minds around it. It seemed impossible. Who was Sarah really? And what made her do it? The more we uncover, the more chilling the story becomes. Sarah wasn't the person everyone thought she was. She wasn't the easygoing, dependable colleague or the loving friend and family member they'd known. No, there was something much more complicated lurking beneath the surface. And now, as we delve deeper into her past, the questions begin to pile up. Was this something that had been building for years? Or was it a sudden, unpredictable explosion of rage and emotion? As the investigation unfolded, one thing became clear. Sarah had been hiding something. A part of her life she'd carefully kept hidden, even from the people closest to her. Maybe it was a deep, unhealed wound from her past, or perhaps it was a secret buried in the fabric of her relationships. Whatever it was, it seemed to have a hold on her, one that no one could have foreseen. The first sign that something was wrong came, ironically, in the form of something that appeared to be perfectly normal. Sarah had been acting a bit withdrawn lately, but nothing unusual, right? She'd been stressed at work? Who wasn't? Everyone was under pressure. There had been a small argument at home, but that was to be expected in any marriage. A little tension, a little frustration. It happens. And yet, as we look closer, we begin to see the pieces coming together. The cracks that no one noticed before. The long hours spent staring at the walls, the whispered phone calls, the sudden, strange silences. At first, no one dared to ask the obvious question. They assumed it was just a phase, that Sarah would bounce back, just like she always had. But what they didn't know was that each of those small moments was building to something much larger, something that no one could have prepared for. Something that would forever change the course of Sarah's life, and the lives of those around her. The moment the event occurred, it wasn't like the world stopped. It wasn't like some dark storm cloud suddenly rolled in. It was instead quiet, a calm that belied the chaos beneath. When the authorities arrived, it wasn't the usual kind of crime scene. It was too clean, too neat. And yet, the chilling reality was undeniable. Something had gone terribly wrong. In the days following the incident, the community was left in shock. There was an outpouring of disbelief, mixed with confusion. Why would Sarah do this? How could someone so seemingly composed, so familiar, suddenly snap? What was the driving force behind it? Was it a personal vendetta, or did Sarah feel cornered in a way she hadn't let anyone else see? Sarah's close friends were left stunned. They remembered her as the woman who always had a smile on her face, who made everyone feel welcome, who worked tirelessly to make sure everything was in its place. And yet, as they reflected on the past few months, they realized that there had been moments where they should have seen the signs, where they should have noticed that something was off. But the truth is, none of them had the full picture. They only saw fragments of Sarah's life, bits and pieces that didn't quite connect. The full story had remained just out of reach. So, what happened to Sarah? How did the woman they thought they knew become capable of such a thing? Was it a breakdown of trust, a betrayal that cracked her world open? Was it a moment of uncontrollable rage, where the weight of years of pain finally found its release? Or was it something much deeper, a combination of hidden trauma, unspoken fears, and years of pent-up frustration? What was Sarah hiding? And why couldn't anyone see it? It's the kind of mystery that makes you rethink everything you know about human nature. It makes you question how well we really know the people in our lives. Could there be someone close to you, someone you trust, who has been hiding their true self all along? And if you found out, would you ever be able to look at them the same way again? We want to hear from you. What do you think drove Sarah to commit such an act? Was it the result of a broken trust? A sudden eruption of fury? Or was there something deeper, something hidden, working its way to the surface? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As we piece together the details of this case, one question stands out. Do you believe Sarah was justified in her actions? Was there any reason, any explanation, that could make sense of this crime? Or was it just an unforgivable decision, driven by forces beyond anyone's control? And if this case has shocked you as much as it has us, don't forget to hit that like button. If you're intrigued by this story, if you want to explore more dark and gripping true crime cases, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll be diving deeper into the mysteries of the human mind and the hidden darkness lurking beneath the surface. Stay with us. There's so much more to uncover. As we continue, the story begins to shift. Up until this point, we've only scratched the surface. Sarah's life, her past, and the forces shaping her decisions remain just out of focus. It's as if we're peering through a fog, trying to make sense of something that doesn't quite fit into the frame. But what happens next? The small clues, the hints, the signs we've discussed, they all start to lead us somewhere, but where exactly? As we uncover more, a chilling thought crosses the mind. Could Sarah's actions be part of something much darker than anyone ever imagined? Let's find out, step by step, as we continue unraveling the details. Now, before we go any further, it's time to take a look at the crime scene itself. You can't truly understand the gravity of what happened without seeing it, without visualizing the scene that would haunt everyone involved. Notice the subtle unease in the surroundings. A few overturned chairs. A strange calmness in the air, almost as if time itself had decided to pause. There's something unsettling about the way everything is arranged, like pieces of a puzzle, but none of them fit together just yet. This is where everything began to fall apart for Sarah. This is where the tension built up for years, a slow and steady pressure that, at some point, couldn't be contained anymore. But we still don't have all the answers. In fact, we're just getting started. Let's rewind a little. Sarah wasn't always the person she became that night. She wasn't always the woman at the center of this controversy, facing charges that no one could have foreseen. No, her life, her mind, had been changing for months, maybe even years. Slowly, so slowly that no one noticed. Her friends, her family, her colleagues, they all saw only pieces of the whole picture, never putting it together. The cracks were subtle, but in hindsight, we see the first signs of a life unraveling. In the days before the incident, her demeanor had changed. She'd become distant, lost in her own thoughts. Her colleagues noticed it first. She was late to work. She'd stop mid-conversation, staring off into space as if her mind was elsewhere. Her boss mentioned that she'd seemed distracted, but then again, everyone gets busy, right? It was just a temporary phase, they thought. Just stress. But was it really just stress, or was there something deeper, something darker taking root? As we delve deeper into the investigation, we discover that Sarah had become involved in a secret relationship. It wasn't something anyone expected, least of all her family. This affair wasn't a fleeting fling. It was complicated, filled with emotions, with risks. It was something Sarah had kept under wraps, buried deep in the recesses of her private life. And though she tried to compartmentalize it, to keep it from affecting her day-to-day, it started to bleed into everything she did. Her work, her family, her friendships, they all began to feel the effects of her divided attention. The more we learn, the more we see the layers unfold one after another. The affair wasn't just about infidelity. It was about control, power, and a sense of validation Sarah had been missing for a long time. It wasn't the kind of affair that was easy to walk away from, and the consequences of it were far-reaching. At this point, the investigation begins to shift. No longer is it just about the moment of the crime itself, it's about what led to that moment. What pushed Sarah to the brink? The relationship soon became strained, as affairs often do. But here's where things start to get really interesting. Sarah wasn't the only one with secrets. Her partner, too, was hiding things, playing games of their own. Could this twisted game have played a role in the tragic outcome that no one could have predicted? The plot thickens, and we begin to see that this wasn't a simple case of a crime of passion. No, Sarah's actions were driven by something far more complex, something we may never fully understand. But we're still not there yet. We still haven't reached the breaking point. We still don't know the full extent of what led Sarah to make that decision, the decision that would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself and everyone around her. The final moments are still a mystery. It's time for another turn in the story. Just when we think we know where things are headed, new revelations throw us off course. The investigators discover something new, something that casts doubt on everything we thought we understood about Sarah's motive. What if this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act at all? What if she had planned it from the very beginning? This new evidence takes us down a path we weren't prepared for. Now, we come to the heart of it. What drove Sarah to this breaking point? We've gone through the motions of the investigation, pieced together her past, but the final answer still eludes us. Was it her partner's betrayal? A series of small, unresolved conflicts? Or was it a culmination of everything she'd kept buried, all the emotions she'd never let anyone see? The more we ask, the more questions arise. Was Sarah a victim in her own way, pushed to extremes she couldn't handle? Or was this all part of a much larger, more disturbing picture? But we still don't have all the answers. This isn't over yet. We've seen the crime scene, explored Sarah's secrets, and uncovered long-buried emotions. Yet we're left with more questions than answers. What's coming next? The investigation is far from over, and as we dive deeper into the unknown, we invite you to come along with us. If this case has left you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button. And for more in-depth stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out. The truth is closer than ever, and we're just getting started. Stick with us. We'll continue to unravel this dark mystery piece by piece. And when the truth finally emerges, you won't believe what we uncover next. As we dig into the facts, it's easy to get caught up in the details of the investigation. But it's important to remember that behind the headlines and legal proceedings are real people, victims whose lives were forever changed, and a mother whose decisions would haunt her for the rest of her life. Mark Smith, a man who had dedicated his life to serving his community, and his daughter, whose young life was shattered that night. They were not just names in a news report, they were people with stories, hopes, and dreams. What happened to them that night is tragic, and we must remember them not just as victims of a crime but as individuals with their own complexities. What drove them to this point, and what could have been done to prevent it? Experts in family dynamics have suggested that certain signs of stress, abuse, or unresolved tension could have been present long before that fatal night. What if the cracks in this family's perfect image had been there for years, hidden beneath the surface? Could this be the culmination of a deeper, more disturbing pattern that no one saw coming? Or was it a momentary lapse in judgment, a mother pushed to the edge by an unbearable revelation? As we explore the psychological aspects of this case, we'll see how events like this don't just happen in a vacuum. They're shaped by years of complicated emotions, relationships, and sometimes, an inability to cope with an overwhelming reality. What could have been done differently to prevent the tragedy that unfolded? The tragic events in Oak Ridge are still unfolding. What happened that night? An incident that has left the entire community questioning everything they thought they knew may never fully be understood. Authorities are working tirelessly to piece together the complex web of emotions, relationships, and circumstances that led to Sarah's violent actions. The investigation continues, but with each new revelation, the truth becomes more elusive. Was it a crime of passion, driven by raw emotion and a sudden eruption of anger? Or was this just the tragic end to a family unraveling at the seams, a culmination of years of pain, secrets, and unresolved tension? The facts continue to surface, but the true motive remains clouded in uncertainty. Sarah's story is far from over, and neither is the investigation. But at this point, we're left to wonder, how did we get here? How did Sarah, someone who seemed so ordinary, end up at the center of a tragedy that no one saw coming? There are so many questions still hanging in the air, so many threads left untied. And as authorities dig deeper, they continue to uncover new details that only add to the complexity of the case. As we wait for more answers, we want to know your thoughts. Do you think Sarah will face the justice she deserves? Or do you believe there are even more shocking twists waiting to be revealed? Will this case take a turn no one is expecting, or will the truth finally be exposed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. In our next episode, we'll dive into the psychological profile of everyone involved in this crime. We'll examine the signs that might have been missed, the clues that may have been right in front of us the whole time. Could we have known more? Were there subtle hints along the way that told us something was wrong? Join us as we explore the hidden motives, the emotional triggers, and the psychological factors at play. It's a deep dive into the human mind, one that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about what drives people to do the unthinkable. But before we end, we leave you with one final question. How far would you go to protect your family? At what point do emotions drive us to extremes? Can we truly understand the breaking point of others, or does it only become clear when it's too late? As you reflect on this case, we challenge you to think about your own limits, the lengths to which you would go for the ones you love. It's a thought-provoking question, one that makes you ask, could I have done the same? Thank you for watching. We'll continue to keep you updated on the latest developments, but for now, stay with us as this gripping case unfolds.